My recollections of the disco era involved dancing in my underwear for my babysitter to the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. Now, while this was a formative experience, it was not, in fact, the inspiration for making this film. I made this film because I went to propose a film to a Canadian arts broadcaster about Harold Pinter, the British playwright. And the broadcaster said, "Nobody gives a shit about Harold Pinter anymore. How about a film on disco?" And I said, "Okay." Well, I interview a number of people in the film who were present during the time. And I guess the essential interplay in the film are between, in a certain sense, it's a film about history. And it's kind of a fun way to do a film about history because it's about disco and it's not about war or death or anything too terrible. So I'm looking at, you know, in this context, the different narratives of looking back on an era that are proposed either by historians and academics who are coming along after the fact and coming up with a theory about what the time was about, and I'm juxtaposing that with interviews with people who are actually there. Come to think of it, it's an incredibly conventional thing to do in a documentary. I wish I had thought of something more original, but too late now. In any case, I interviewed a number of performers from the disco era, and many of them, it's an interesting thing interviewing celebrities who were famous for the peak of their career. It's an interesting thing interviewing celebrities whose career peaked 30 years ago. And on one hand, and obviously their experiences have been divergent. You know, I have a lot of big names from the disco era in this film. Gloria Gaynor, Village People, Kool and the Gang, Thelma Houston, et cetera, KC from KC and the Sunshine Band. And some people seem surprisingly bitter about the whole era, like KC from KC and the Sunshine Band, for instance, is kind of cranky, is really the only word for it, when he's questioned about the era. And I can't understand why, because he's one of the few people who wrote a lot of the songs. So he actually had a number of hits, which was unusual for disco artists, which he also wrote, which means he's doubtless made a lot of money over the years. Unlike a number of the singers, the women singers particularly, but a number of the singers did not write their own songs. They often had just one hit, and so life has not necessarily been so easy for them. Some people, like Gloria Gaynor, were savvy enough to build on their celebrity when disco died in America around 1979, 1980. Some people like Gloria Gaynor were savvy enough to build on their celebrity internationally and continue to make a living touring all these years. And I think she, for instance, is doing quite well. For others, it's clearly been more of a struggle. So in short, there was a range of feeling amongst the celebrities of the disco era, talking to them 30 years on. You know, life has treated them differently. Huge amount of archives in this film, and fortunately I have a great team I work with. I have a top visual researcher named Elizabeth Klink. I have a great editor I've worked with many times, Greg West, and there's obviously a huge art to both finding the right archive and selecting the right archive, because in terms of what I shot new for this film, it was really just interviews. And then there's a whole fictional layer that was part of the ironic commentary of the project. But I knew always that I would be very dependent on archives, so I hired the best people I could. And we had a range of stuff. We found some remarkable stuff. The reason I was happy to make a film on disco, even though I went in to pitch to the broadcaster a film on Harold Pinter, is because I knew it was a very colorful era. No matter what, it would be a fun time to plunge into and to try to recreate. But it took an enormous amount of work, months and months in editing with very talented people. I don't take the credit for that part. You know, I was there going, wow, that's great, thanks. I mean, all right, I am the director, I had some say over it. But it's really a collaborative effort to effectively marry the footage from all sorts of eras and make it feel like a seamless whole to really give the audience the feeling of being in 1974 or 1973. And that was a big part of the challenge of making this film. It was also a lot of fun. And it was nice to have the budget to be able to do it, because the other real challenge of making archive-based films is that it's a complete nightmare in terms of rights. It's very expensive, and then it's very expensive trying to track down who owns it, and on it goes. But hopefully the result is worth it.